almost no developer would dream of writing a React app without using context. It's that common and that big a thing. So, of course, we'll talk about React hooks and the various ones we've learned. And we specifically omitted, you may have noticed, conspicuous by its omission, we omitted one React hook. And we'll talk about prop drilling, which is how we've written all of our React apps up until now. And then we'll talk about Context API along with providers. These two go together. Context API means you have a context provider, which provides what? Shared state. That's what it provides. That's the brass ring, or the ultimate goal is having state that is shared by every component without doing this prop drilling thing. And yes, it can be done. And we'll talk about that. We'll talk about this quickly too. This is a really important concept to understand. Interface versus implementation. What does that mean? We'll discuss that for sure. This is a big one. This is something you should train yourself to do. Otherwise, you're writing real nasty spaghetti code that would not pass muster in any company at all. Okay, so I have a little app here. Okay, you may have seen this before. It's a little app. It's a 2-page app. I have a login page here. I can log in and I can log in and I show some random stuff. I think this is all made up. There. Okay, that's it. That's my app. 2 pages, does nothing. It looks like this. I've got these 2 pages, login, and I called it info, for lack of a better name. Login page, and of course I conditionally rendering it based on, is there an auth flag set? Classic conditional rendering, right? Which is, as we know now, something like React Router, that's all it does, is this. And I do say, for small projects, nobody needs to use React Router ever, unless you want some very specific features from React Router. If all you want is multi-pages, you don't use it. In fact, they even say, hey, if all you want is multi-page apps, don't use us. That's not what we do. We do it, but that's not why we have React Router. We have it because there are other features, and one in particular is called deep linking. Have you heard that term? Deep linking. Let's do an example. One thing React Router does, which I haven't got here, if I log in, this will change. It will now say /info. Now it's fake. It just sets it. But React Router does that. It changes the address bar to now say info. What happens if I make a shortcut? So I copy that and I paste that in there. What am I going to get? Well, I'm going to get my app starting. It ignores everything else. It just starts my app. It starts my React app and it totally ignores all of this. But with React Router, you can actually go to, if it wasn't a login page, it would take you straight there to the page. That's called deep linking. You can save a shortcut to a part of the React app. It'll go back there. Now that's cool. That's very cool. You probably don't want that in your final projects because it's just hard. It's such a small thing to demo. It's very cool and people expect it, but you're not going to be demoing this in 5 minutes, very likely. Okay. So that's what React Router does. It allows you to route directly to pages. You get this multi-page thing for free, but that's all they do. That's kind of it. Take a variable and flip, if something, do something. Anyway, we're here to talk about Context API. So I have my app, and it looks like this, by the way. Here's my little, my app, and I've got a login page, info page, and each one of those pages has a counter. Yay, counters. You knew you would never get away without a counter, right? Like you're with me. Okay, so there's a counter, and it does what a counter does. Yes. Okay. And my info page also has a counter. I log in, has a counter too. There we go. Okay. And of course, each of these counters, take a look at the counter. It has state, all the stuff a counter needs to do some state stuff. Really no surprise here. So each one of my counters has its own state. Plus, if I log out, but you may notice They're not synchronized, are they? Each of these counters exists in the page. In other words, these are two separate instances of counter. This is counter A, this is counter B, and they are in nowhere related other than this, they simply share the same code, but they are different instances of this of a counter. So this counter, go 7. If I log in, you know by now it's not going to be 7, it's going to be 0 because it's getting destroyed. This, of course, this conditional rendering also has a side effect of destroying this one. Remember re-render? We talked about that. When this re-renders, everything's gone, right? Everything's gone. Everything's brand new. This never even gets made. Never sees it. Only that line gets run, which means only that info gets instantiated at that time. There is no login. So the next time it runs, it's a brand new login, which means it goes back to 0. Okay. So there's my app with my state. What I want to have both these counters share the same state. That's my goal today. Simple goal, but they are not children of each other. So I can't really put it here. So where's the state going to have to go in order to be shared in the classic way we know by doing it right now? Based on what we've done so far, where would we put this state to share it? We'd probably push it up, wouldn't we? Right up to app. And you're right. That's where it should be, in the closest common ancestor. Like vampires, right? All over again. Closest, remember that? Any remember the closest common ancestor, all that stuff, and which vampires senior, that wasn't that fun? I miss those days. Those were fun days. Okay. So there's our state. It has to be here, doesn't it? And then we can pass the state down like this to each of our counters. And now there's only one copy, which means it's shared state. So this is shared state. And we had this in our Compass, our last project, didn't we? Who loved that? That was lots of fun, wasn't it? We had to pass things all the way down. I think 3 or 4 times to get to that button, be able to do stuff. I think it was 4 levels deep. Same thing. We have to pass the counter down through the login page, which couldn't care less about counter. It's not using it. It passes it down to its counter, and the info page does the same. So these 2 pages, my login page, it just passes. Well, right now it passes it down. Okay, so I'd have to pass counter to my login page. I have to go counter equals counter, and then my login page would also have to pass counter equals props.counter, and so on. And I may have, a lot of levels. This may be 5, 6, and it can be 100. React apps can get complex, right? So you can have a lot of levels. It quickly becomes a problem, doesn't it? And of course, you know the name for that. It is called prop drilling. This is a bad thing. It's very annoying. And we made you write an entire app based on prop drilling. Wasn't that fun? Yes. No, it wasn't fun. And they change names sometimes on the way down. That can happen. It might be is favorite on one side, but inside the button is selected because it's a button. Doesn't know it's a favorite button. It's just a button. So it makes sense to change the names to be appropriate to the component it has. So that gets even more confusing. Is favorite equals props dot was clicked? I can't remember. Anyway, it is an issue. Now, passing props is perfectly fine if it's the state exists in the parent and it's a child. Totally no problem at all. You should not share state everywhere, but state that deserves to be shared. In this case, I've got this counter. It's a counter. It deserves to be shared. All right. So we take this state, we push it up here, and we pass it all the way down to each component. And I've actually done that. Let me grab that. I've got a copy here of this app written in the prop drilling method. So now let's take a look what I did here. I did this instead. There, I put the count here up in app now. So I've actually done this in this branch. So there's my count, and I pass my count to each of my pages. And now if I go plus, 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 there, it's 5. So I do have shared state, right? But I've done this. And not only that, I have another problem, because in my app, I not only have the state, but a bunch of functions that operate on that state: increment and decrement and clear. That means I have to pass a state down. I also have to pass these functions all the way down too. Well, now it's becoming a real mess. I'm passing one state and 3 functions all the way down. It's only 2 levels, but it could be 10. Serious prop drilling going on here. And this is only a counter. It's just a counter. And I'm adding all this work. So now, as you can see, I'm passing down to my login page all this stuff that it couldn't care less about. Count and these 3 functions all the way down. And these components, go to this one, it passes, just keeps on passing them along. They're not used anywhere in here at all. Classic prop drilling. And it's a classic problem. It works, but it's a huge cost, isn't it? We don't want this. But this is the way we first learned React, and which is why we did this in Compass, not just to be mean, to teach you about props and how props can pass down, but we wouldn't do it that way in a real app because that's just painful, isn't it? I mean, it was just, this is awful. And you have, what if you stick something in the middle? What if you got to add a component in the middle? We got to remember that that component has a bunch of props got to pass down the line. If you want to restructure your component tree, you got to remember, oh, I got these 20 props I also have to pass down. Huge mess. So how do we solve that? Well, we solve it with what's called context. Context to the rescue. So instead of having this, we have this. Huh. Looks a bit different. We have our component tree, but we have this context thing, which seems to be enclosing our components in some funny blanket wrapping way. And that's actually exactly what it's doing. It is, in fact, wrapping our components in a nice big warm gray blanket. And with this design, any component anywhere down the tree has access to anything in the context. It can be here, it can be here, it can be 1,000 components down, doesn't matter. It has instant access to any state that you've placed in the context. So that's what we end up with. It's very, very cool. When I first saw this, I thought, wow, holy crap, this is awesome. I'm gonna use this everywhere. Don't use it everywhere. It has its place. Don't put all your state, please, don't put all your state for your application in one place. It doesn't belong there. Like if you've got a login page, that just types the state belongs in the page. As the all place it belongs in my login component, there's a state, email, password. It belongs here because it's only used here. Okay, so don't share everything. But things like your application data we had in our project in Compass, that would be a great candidate for context. There's the photos, all the topics, that certainly is a great place to put it in context. All right. Well, how to do this? Sounds great, Gary, but so how do we make this thing work? What do I have to do to get me one of these contexts? Let's take a look. So let's talk about React hooks. Now, we've learned a couple of things. Let's take a look. There's my tree. Oh, that. There. We've learned a few hooks, haven't we? What was the first hook we learned? The very first one. The very, very first one we used. Use what? Use, yes, I can read lips. Use state. Use state, correct. Very first one. Followed pretty closely by use effect. There we go. Use effect. And these are 2 big ones. Really, it's almost impossible to have an app, certainly without that. You can't have any app, isn't any functional app. You can't have any app without use state, can you? You could have use reducer, you're right. Reducer, there. So this we know is a substitute for use state, okay, gaining less popularity as it ages. Okay, so but really Our A-listers are useState and useEffect. These are like the red carpet. They're the A-listers, aren't they? When they come in, it's like, oh, wow, there's Ryan Reynolds. Who's an A-lister? I don't know. Who pick an A-lister. I don't know who they are. I don't know. Chris Hemsworth. I like Thor, so I think it's cool. Yes, A-lister, right? Then you got your aging A-listers that are kind of trying hard, you know. So yeah, like this is like the Tom Cruise of the Hook world. It still is pretty good. He pulls in a good crowd, but time to hang it up. Okay, someday. Please don't make a Top Gun. Was it 3, 4? I don't know. It's gonna be like Fast and Furious. Top Gun 13. Yes, back from the grave again. His clone lives on. It's mark my words, that's going to happen. Absolutely. Okay. So here's your A-listers. Well, turns out there are 3 A-listers in the Hook world. 3 of them. Let's take a look. Let's go to some talk. When you talk about hooks, it's very common when you look at a discussion on hooks, they talk about hooks. They talk about the 3 main hooks. Where are they? Hooks, 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 hooks. Let's go to the bottom. Where is all hooks? Here we go. Ah, yes. Okay. React hooks. useState. See, people always talk about these 2 first and use context. It is an A-lister, and Tom Cruise, useReducer is kind of after the A-listers. Maybe before. Don't they come last on the red carpet? Who comes first? Who watches the Oscars? Is the A-listers first, or they just kind of trickle in? I have no idea. No clue. Okay. Anyway, so there's the 3. These are ones everyone wants to see on the carpet. Okay. These are very useful, and there's lots of hooks. There's tons of hooks, and even more than these, right? Lots of them. But these 3, they're your stars. They are the ones that draw the money. Okay. useState, useEffect, use context. Most React apps use those 3, and really aren't complete with using at least those 3. Right. Let's talk about use context. So it is use context. And we certainly could use Reducer. It solves a problem that existed back in the class component world. But it's still useful for updating complex state. But we know that React says, well, don't make complex state. So yeah, okay. Anyway, it's a danger zone. Okay. Okay. So what do I have to do to make this work? Let's go back to our original version here. Let's take this. So I got to reset this. You can't switch branches without there. Switch back to branch. As we all know now, of course, using VS Code, we all know we can switch branches, right? In VS Code. We all know that, right? It's super easy. Yeah, just click on here. I can tell I'm on that branch. I want to go to my start branch. There, start branch. Very easy. We showed you the hard way, since the first week. Git checkout, git push, git commit. Yeah, it was painful. But we now know that it's much easier done this way. Okay. So I'm going to first take my code. So let's make my counter. I've got this counter. Here's the state. I want this state to be shared. So what I'm going to do first is, because I want to get what's called a context provider. So we have our context, this is the context. The context is provided by provider, a context provider, hence the name. So we need to write ourselves a context provider. Fortunately, those things ain't hard. And they look an awful lot like a custom hook. Very, very similar to a custom hook. So that's why I'm going to take this, and instead I'm going to put this in a custom hook, because there's an easy transition from that to a provider. So let's make myself a hook. Put it here. I'll call it use counter. That sounds like a good name. .js. There. Take my stuff from here. Just like in an application data, just copy and paste, right? Take it out of here. And it's a helper function. I'm just going to take this code, grab it out of here, and instead put in a helper function that I'm going to call use counter. Just like this. There. I'll make a function. I'll call it use counter. There. And let's make the end. There, put all our stuff inside that function. By the way, you may notice I am very hesitant to delete braces. So I didn't delete this. I simply moved stuff into it. There is a temptation when coding to do this. If you have like this, right? Function, go there. Oh, let's delete that one, and we'll add it later. We won't forget. Yeah, we always forget. Or this, you start typing something, console.log. We'll delete that. We start typing. Of course, we forget it. So try to resist. Just leave it there and put stuff in it. Okay. Okay, so there's my function. Use counter. Custom hook. Simple. I'm going to import use state, control space, and there, which I love because I'm so lazy. There we go. I've got almost a custom hook. Missing one last thing. Probably should export default this thing. Default my counter there, but I'm missing one thing. Missing what? Missing one thing. Nobody can use this, can they? It doesn't return anything. So it can't be used. It needs to return some stuff. So I'm going to return stuff. Return, I'm going to make it probably an object, I think. So I'll go ahead and use that. So let's return an object. Can't hurt, right? And we'll return our counter and our increment and our decrement and our clear. There, okay. So now I have myself a custom hook that returns those 4 things. Format that. How's it looking? I'm sure I've forgotten something. Back to my counter. There it is. Instead of this, I'm going to use counter. Counter. There. And I get these 3 things: increment, decrement, and clear. It is an object, it's a count, it's an array. What do you think? Should I go with array or object in my custom hook? Design choice, right? We're not sure. I'm going to choose object because I might not want to always use all of them all the time and in different orders. So I'm going to go with maybe just making this an object, which means they're named. Okay, which is fine. I'll go with that. So in my counter, I'm going to make an object here. So like this. There. Has to look the same. Okay. Refresh my app. How's it looking? Clear. Yes, of course. Sorry about that. There. Okay. And we'll take a look. So, refresh my app. It's working. There we go. Plus, plus, plus. So it's doing its thing, right? There's my plus, minus, and clear. I've just taken this logic and put it in a helper function. Nothing has changed, has it? I still have 2 copies or 2 instances of counter, which means I have 2 instances of this, which means I have 2 sets of state. There's no shared state going on here. So there's no difference. I have the same problem. I haven't solved anything, but I have taken this out because now I can take this use counter and convert it to a context. And those are actually pretty simple. So what does a context look like? Well, let's take a quick look at our little picture here. There. It's this thing that wraps all these components or encloses the components, or these components are children of the context or the context provider. And that implies that we use these terms enclose or children of. That means that a provider is probably a pointy bracket thing. So, for example, in my app.js, here, if I want to wrap these 2 components in something, well, let's do a fragment. There, like this. The simplest case, I would just take this, there. And you could say that these 2 components are wrapped with that fragment, or the fragment is the parent, and these are the children of that element. So that's what we mean by the word wrapping something. or enclosing or enclosed. These components are enclosed within, and of course, they are all enclosed within this div. So you could say this div is wrapping all of this stuff. That's the terminology, wrapping or enclosed. Okay, so it looks like whatever a context is going to be, it's going to be a pointy bracket thing, isn't it? It's going to have pointy brackets. And what things in React have pointy brackets? Starts with C. It's a component. Yeah, it's not a trick question. It's the only thing. So it looks like our context provider is going to be a component. Okay, let's go ahead and make one. In fact, I'm going to copy this one. I'm going to put it in a folder or directory called providers. This is very common. And I'm going to put it in source. Oh, put it in source. So providers. You'll see things in professional apps. You'll see a hooks directory. You'll see a providers directory. You may have seen this in some example code already. Providers, like, what the hell is that? Providers. Well, we're going to make one. So this is very common. So we're going to copy this hook because they look so much like a provider. We'll just copy it, but instead we're going to call it a counter provider. Now you noticed I gave it a capital C. What does that imply? Implies going to be a component. Exactly. Yes. So let's take that name and we're going to call it capital C. There. Now it's a component, isn't it? No, it's not. It's just a function. We all know that the definition of a component is a function that returns JSX. That's right. Yes. So, and we're not. So let's take that. We're going to make this step, make it a value. I'll make it const. I'll just give it a number. We'll need this stuff. Return. Instead, we'll call it const. We'll say value equals. We'll save this because we're going to need it later. And let's return ourselves just some fragment for now. There. Now it's a component. That's it. We simply return JSX. So this is a component. Having capital C is a good start, but you got to return some JSX. This is now a component, which means we can use it with pointy braces, can't we? Anywhere in our code. And that's exactly what we're going to do in a couple seconds here. All right. By the way, we're almost done with this. This ain't hard. We're almost done converting this into a context provider. There's one little thing we have to add. We have to first create a context. We've got to create a context. And it has to be a context that is importable or used by other components, which means it needs to be outside of here, right? Anything needs to be in our top level. Like this is being exported, which means you can import it. So I'll just make it here. I'll go export there. I'll say const. I'll call it my counter context. Okay. So it says, oh, it must be initialized. So you can't just do this. You can't import something without saying, give it, I don't know, a number. It's got to be something. It has to be equal to something. Well, what's it going to be equal to? How can I create a context? So I want to grab a context. I need to create a context. Well, it turns out there's a function in React called create context. It's part of React. There. Done. That's it. That's all I needed. Create context. And now I have one that anybody else can import that context and, spoiler alert, they can use that context. Bit of a spoiler for later. Okay. There. We are almost done. Really, we're really close to being done converting our custom hook. We added one line of code. We changed the title and returned some JSX. Not hard stuff, right? All the stuff stays the same. This is stuff we want to share with the world, these things. So we want to share the counter and these three functions. These are things we're sharing with. The term is exposed. We're exposing these things to the world. These things are being exposed out of our provider. So one last step, it's kind of the trickiest part, but fortunately, it looks identical every single time that we do provider. It looks like this. Okay, so instead of this, we're going to do this. Pointy bracket again, but now we use the counter context. But that's not a component. It's a context. You can't just do this. But inside it, it has a dot provider. Even notice that. There. There we go. Now it's a context provider. It is providing context. That provides nothing right now. So it's a provider, but that provider right now provides nothing. It doesn't provide anything. So how do I tell my provider to provide something? Well, what do I want to provide? I want to provide this thing. That's what I want to share, this object. So it takes a prop or an attribute, which is called, by coincidence, it's called value equals value. And there we go. We now have a provider that provides that object. That's as simple as it gets. I'm omitting one thing, by the way. You'll notice that in a second. But there, I've got a provider that provides that state or that context value. That's it. This is the trickiest part, but this part here looks the same for all of them. There's no difference. This is all boilerplate. Your stuff is kind of here. It's pretty easy to write. Okay, so let's go ahead and use our provider. Let's go to our app. We talked about wrapping things, right? We want to wrap our app. So I want to wrap these two components, and by extension, any of its children. So in my app.js, I'm going to go ahead and, instead of a fragment, I'm going to now instead put the capital C provider, just like that. And now let's take that and wrap pretty much all of our stuff in this thing. Okay. There. Success. Anybody noticed a change to my app? It's gone. What happened? My stuff is gone. Where's my stuff? Any errors? Let's take a look. Just in case, we'll refresh the app. Let's take a look. No. Oh, use state. Yeah, I can get rid of use state now in my counter. That's fine. So, but there's no errors. Nothing is wrong. So nothing's gone wrong. But where the heck is all my stuff? It's gone. Huh. Now, we don't do a lot of this, by the way. I noticed in the Compass work, we actually don't have nested components like this, do we? I don't think we have any of them, do we? I think we put components in the return of the child, but we don't actually could component with this parent-child relationship. But this is actually pretty common in real-world apps. You would do this. You'd have this and then put stuff inside of that component. Okay. So why is my stuff not showing up? Well, the key is in my provider. What's my provider rendering? I'm saying render a component. It's returning this. What if I type this? Hello. What's going to happen? Oh, I get hello there. Hey. Whoops. Can't put a div there. Why not? Sure. Okay. Wow. Scary. Say, hey. I got hey. So it looks like this is rendering stuff no problem at all. But why isn't my login and info showing up at all? Well, what's happening is my provider is not rendering anything. It's not rendering the login or info. It's rendering this. So these children are not getting rendered. How do we make a component render its children? These are, of course, this is the parent, and these are the children of this component or element. This is XML theory stuff, parent and children. So how do we get a component to render its children? We talked about this on day 1 of React, the first lecture, or they should have talked about this. This is an important one. Props, but it's a special prop. You're right, it is props. Just give our thing some props. But it's a special props. Props what? Props dot. What's the one you get for free? It's always there. Let's go back. Let's take a look at our app. Okay. This is the parent. Therefore, these are the fill in the blank. The parent and the house mortgage. No. Again. Parent and the car payment. No. Stick with me. Parent and the children. Oh yeah, the children. Oh, I forgot about them. Yeah, house payment. Oh yeah. Of course, those little things running around the house that cost me money. Yes, the children. Of course. The children. There is a props dot children. There. That's how you render children. Let's go back. We'll take a look. There they are. It all showed up. Very common, by the way. We didn't do an example like this in Compass. I'm kind of surprised. This is done a lot. Nesting components. Components within components, which means this component had better render these children. Otherwise, they're going to get ignored because this isn't being shown. Only the content of this component is being shown. So it has to, in turn, render the children. This is, by the way, what every provider has. This code there is identical. This does not change. Get a value and just, this is boilerplate. Copy and paste that. All of them look just like this. And now it's a complete working provider. It's not bad. There's your state and your functions and this kind of funky thing with the provider dot thing here. And props of children. There. They all look the same. They really do all look the same. Okay, well now I've got a provider and I've now wrapped my children, these two, in the context the provider provides. How do I go ahead and use this context? Okay, let's give it a try. So now, there, my counter. Import my counter context. There. Okay. Now I have the context. So now I'm going to use that context. So instead of use counter, what hook should I use? Anyone? I've got a context, so I can use context. Use context. There. And what context to use? Well, my counter context. There. Let's make it a little wider so I can see it there. There we go. That's it. Using a context is very simple. Import the context and then use it. It's super simple. Don't need that anymore. There we go. And now, what have I got here? Is it going to work at all? Let's double check. I get so lazy with VS Code. There we go. Okay. Okay. And that's it. It was really the same as my custom hook. I just replaced it with my use context. So now, well, it is working, isn't it? Let's test this. Let's now go to our second page. That's an 8. Fingers crossed. And there it is. Now I have shared state. I have this counter shared inside the context, and now it's available everywhere in the app, anywhere down the tree, right? I could put anywhere. It's always available. So I have achieved shared state, which is the goal of using context. Is this that simple? So that's how it works. You create the provider, which kind of looks like a custom hook, doesn't it? It's pretty similar. But instead of returning this thing, make it a value, and then return this JSX with this funny thing. That's all I have to do. Apart from that, it's a lot like a custom hook. But now, whatever you return here ends up in your contacts, and anybody can use it anywhere. For instance, my login could use it. Here, I could put it here somewhere. Let's say my login. Sure, I'll go to my login, and I'll make my info there. This page. Let's put a div here. Why not? There. We'll call it counter. There. And I'll put the counter here. Of course, we have to, import and use the context, don't we? We can't just do this because it's not a global variable. this is going to crash. It's going to say doesn't exist. I'm probably going to get no counter. Yeah. Counter's not defined. So that's not going to work. I have to somehow initialize that counter. Well, easy enough. The same thing. I would go here. I'd go import my counter context there. And then I can const. It's an object, so counter equals use context of my counter context. There. Try it again. There, plus, 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 up. There we go. Plus, plus, plus. And there. There it is. 2 lines of code, import and use. And any component anywhere on the tree can do this. Now, this is useful, right? Any component anywhere can simply, by importing the context and using it, get any piece of that thing they want. I could grab the button, I suppose. Let's put a button. I don't know. Let's put some fun here. Let's put a button in there. Button. There. We'll just call it clear. There. And we're going to import the clear function. There. Okay. On click equals clear. On click equals clear. There. How does it look? It sounded, when you change context, sometimes messes up your app. So there, it works just fine. By adding 2 lines of code, you have instant access to any shared state. Use context is great. It is really, really great. And as you can see, totally solves the problem of this nasty prop drilling thing. So who votes I like this? Who votes I like this? Well, of course, we like this, right? And multiple contexts, yes, you can. Absolutely. You can have as many as you want. Now, be judicious with it, right? But can you nest use context? You could. I could put something else here as well. Maybe an auth context. Maybe want to share this stuff. Not a bad idea. The current user maybe have authentication context or auth where I share these things, log in, log out. In fact, let's try that. Let's go ahead and share our auth stuff, okay? All right, so let's go make yourself another provider. I'm going to copy this one just to prove how easy this is. Let's copy this one there. I'm going to call it auth because it does authentication stuff. Provider. And this is my auth context. There. And we'll call this auth provider. Looking pretty good. This all goes. That's nothing now. There, and this goes, want that. There. So, by the way, there is a boilerplate provider right there. All it has is create context and the stuff it needs. So this, you call this an empty provider, like a template. You can use as a template for provider. Let's take the stuff out of app. There. Well, I want those things. There's a state I want to share. My 2 states and these 2 functions. Let's go ahead and take that and put that inside a provider right there. So take that and there we go. It's inside there. And I want to return the user, maybe the auth flag. I know I have that. It's kind of silly. And I have a login function and a logout function. There. I'm done. That was it. Pretty simple, huh? Just take the state. Now, good point. The state and the functions that change that state belong together. You would never have user here and then set user called someplace else. Set user should only be called ever inside here, this file. You would never share these set state or set auth functions with anybody else. We'll talk about that in a second. We'll talk about interfaces and implementations. Never do that. Bad. Bad practice. Don't pass set auth or set user anyplace else. Keep it all inside here. We'll talk about why. Okay. Okay, and each context hook gets its own provider component, one or one. Well, it's not a hook anymore. It's a context provider now, right? It's a context provider, and its own provider component. Well, yes, correct. It does. Each of these contexts, it's built into this thing. When React calls create context, you get this dot provider as part of the object it provides. It's a component. Okay. I'm done. That was quick. Took me like just a copy and paste of those things in there, make a proper value, and the rest is all boilerplate. Didn't change a thing. So now I have an auth provider. I want to use this provider to share user with my app. So right now it's used in a couple places. It's used here. Got the log. If the login function is passed down to my login component, and the log out function is passed down to my info component and the user. Okay. And it looks like I use it here too, with auth. Okay. Now here's a fun fact about use context. I'll make a mistake here. I'm going to show you on purpose. I'm going to purposely comment these two lines out and show what happens if you forget to wrap something there. Well, it doesn't work, but I get this funny error. Yeah, right there. Really unhelpful error. Object ... is undefined. Means nothing, right? But this is a useful one. When you see this, it tells you one thing. It says on info line 14. Let's go there. Use context. If you try to use context and you are a component that is not wrapped by the provider, it doesn't work. You get this weird error. Object, something is undefined. Really unhelpful. So only components that have been wrapped can use a context. In other words, in here, only components wrapped inside here can use it. So can app use the counter context? No, it can't. It's not inside. So it's out in the cold. Looks kind of cold, it's turning green. So it can't, but these ones can. So in order to use a context, you must be wrapped by that context provider. That's one of those rules. Okay. Let's go back to app and rewrap our things, make everyone happy again. And how does it look now? App use state's not defined. Who cares? Okay. Everyone's happy. Shared counter. Well, now I want to share this stuff as well. So I've done that. I've got my context provider. So I suppose I should use my provider because I need the auth flag here, don't I? So I want to use auth. So I can take all this stuff now, auth and user, and I can import the context. So import my auth context from my auth provider. And I'm going to say const, well, my auth and my user and login and log out, all the things I use here, equals use context, import that, the auth context. There, I don't need any of these things. It's replacing all the state because now all that state now is in my context. Okay, blank screen. What's it saying? Object ... is undefined. So what haven't I done? Well, it's not wrapped, is it? This app is not wrapped in the auth provider. You must be wrapped in a provider in order to use that context from the provider. But this is app. How the heck do I wrap app? It's the top level. Like, look, see? There. It's the top one. How can I make a parent of app when app is the top thing? How is that even possible? Like, I can't do this, can I? I can't say auth provider and do something funky like that. No, you can't. That's not JavaScript. It's not going to work. But conceptually, this is what I want, right? I need this. This is what I need. Well, how's this going to work? Oh, I'm kind of stuck. I need to have app wrapped, but app is the top. Or is it? Is app the top? No, I don't think it is. In fact, it's not the top. What's the top? The main file or the entry point of a React app. It's index, right? Index is the entry point, and there's app right there. Just sitting there waiting to be wrapped. Exactly. So let's wrap it here instead. Yeah, great choice. So we'll call this auth provider. There. And let's wrap our little old app in that. Now it's wrapped in a provider. So now if I go to my app.js, so can I sleep type stuff? Oh, well, it's kind of doing stuff now. It's kind of cool. Looks like I can log in, log out. Okay. Are these things still working? Yep, that's still working. So now I have auth and login out. But look at this. I'm passing login and logout to these. I don't need to do that anymore, do I? They can get it from the context. So why don't I simply have, instead of these, I'll have each of these two pages grab their own copy of the context. Let's go to login here. There. Grab the context, and we'll instead, we're going to say login. Const login equals. So const login equals use context of that auth context. There. Okay. And instead of props.login, it just needs login now. There. I think it's all it uses is that one thing is that login. Take a look. And that works. Okay. And now props is not even used anymore. No. Props is not used. Let's delete props. No need for props. Okay. Let's go to our info page. It's going to be exactly the same. To our info page. Let's go there. We'll grab that thing, put that in there. And we're going to say, we'll say const. Now this one uses the user, and it uses the clear and the logout. Uses user and logout. There we go. Equals use context of my auth context. There. So don't need these two anymore. There. And now prop is not used. This is going to work. Let's take a look. Let's check our any weird errors. Let's make sure. Oh, apart from these, that's fine. Let's take a look now. Man, wow, it's all working. And now I don't need any props at all in any of my components. So this can go, it's not used, and this is not used. So now I've gone prop free. Yes, I pulled the plug, cut the cord, cut the prop. Yeah. Okay, yeah, I've written a completely prop-free app. There's no props at all in this app. Every single component gets what it needs from the context, which is great, and it works. Look at that. There. Log in. I'm so excited. Oh man, this is awesome. Okay, so now don't go nuts. Don't put everything in context. Keep things in context, okay? Lots of good jokes in context. Keep it in context. The user, great candidate, right? Wouldn't it be great to have every component know what the current logged in, you were logged in as Bob, or hello, Bob, or hey, Bob. Press here, Bob. Don't press here, Bob. Yeah, lots of cool stuff anywhere in your app, okay? Let's touch base one more time what I talked about when I talked about interfaces versus implementations. So here is some state. Okay. Now you notice I've got login, logout, or even better, let's go to our counter provider. There. Now I've made these three functions. Why didn't I just share instead set counter and be done with it? Why bother making these stupid functions Instead, why I could share one function instead. In fact, in my tree here, why not just pass the one function down instead of three? Just pass that counter. It's easy. Not four things. Why am I instead passing these functions and not set counter? The answer is this. This is this whole concept of implementation versus interface. This is such a core concept of certainly object-oriented programming, but best practices in general. No one needs to know what an increment does. Now, we can guess, but this is a detail. This is an implementation detail of how these things are done. It's a secret. Nobody should know, or nobody else should be accessing state. Only you, this file, should be touching state. Everything else is done through a function that does it for you. So for example, in a photo labs, done the correct way, photo labs, you should have had a function called is favorite, or you, depending, and a function called toggle event, toggle favorite. There, favorite. Wow. Can't spell the American way. Man. Okay. That's it. We would never pass anything. We wouldn't pass the favorites array down. No, that's a secret. That's an implementation detail. We pass these interface functions down. Here's to tell if you're a favorite, and here's a function to change it, to toggle it. That's it. That's all you need to know. It's an interface. So these functions are interface functions. Here's a functional increment. It will increment the counter for you. How? Don't worry about that. That's none of your business. We'll do it for you. It's this whole concept of encapsulation and interfaces and separation of concerns all together. Write interface functions that deal with state. For example, use reducer, the dispatch function. You would never pass dispatch anywhere in your app. By the way, I see tons of stuff online, examples that do just that. Never do that, ever. Pass hidden or functions that hide the details, because maybe the clear function also does an axios dot put and some other stuff, right? Who knows what it does? Maybe this does an axios dot put as well, axios dot post maybe, and saves the counter. It's a detail, right? So this may do a whole bunch of other stuff that no one else needs to know about. The effect will be that when they get the counter, it'll go up by 1. But the implementation detail is this stuff, who knows, all going inside here. I really can't stress that enough when you code, write interfaces, write functions that hide details from people or from other components. All right, that's my soapbox for today. That's our talk on context. Sorry, a bit over time. Great feature to use for shared state in your apps, and I encourage you to use it. I'll post this code. As you can see, I have all these branches that show us how we did things going forward. Look at that. Even one that does a complex state, which you probably shouldn't do. I made an example just for fun. Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone. Looking forward to seeing everyone's final projects, and I will talk to everyone really soon. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you so much, Gary.
See you guys later.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.